about his first girlfriend, actually, that he was with for 3 years back in those days. 40 years later, he's still looking back at her as the first love, and the deepest love of his life. Good morning, and welcome to a special edition of the Clarion Call. Friends, today we celebrate the life of Brian Wilson, leader of the Beach Boys, who was born on June 20th, 1942, and passed away yesterday, June 11th, 2025, at the age of 82. Brian, pictured here on the screen playing the bass guitar, was also the architect of one of the greatest musical sounds ever created, America's band, known as the Beach Boys. It was a family group. To Brian's right, playing one of the guitars, is his brother, Carl Wilson, and back in the back, playing the drums, is the other brother, Dennis Wilson. The young fellow on the extreme right is Brian Love, who was a first cousin of theirs. And the guy on the extreme left of the screen is Al Jardine, who was a neighbor where they grew up in Hawthorne, California. They took the world by storm, starting in 1962 with Surf and Safari and a bunch of other surfer songs, including Surfer Girl, that were, near the top of the hit parade. And they continued to produce hit records throughout most of the 60s, including such masterpieces as Good Vibrations. Brian had a very troubled life. He couldn't stand the stress of touring. So very early on, in 1965, he stopped touring with the band and devoted all his efforts to writing the music, arranging the music, spent huge amounts of time in recording studios trying to get that perfect sound that he heard in his head. Today, I want to show you his evolution. He went through a very difficult period where he had mental illness, depression, he was hallucinating. In 1966, actually, that began. He struggled for many years, but eventually he came out of that and produced some remarkable music in his later career. So I'm going to give you two examples, the 1962 song Surfer Girl, and then 45 years later, in 2008, he had an album of original songs called Lucky Old Sun. And one of the songs on there was a song that kind of talked about the same girl that he had originally written the first song about, and this one was called Forever You'll Be My Surfer Girl. I'm going to react to both of those songs, but let's start it off with the original. This may have been the first song that Brian ever wrote, so you can see early on he had amazing talent. So there you have it, already a fairly advanced version of Brian's famous 5-part harmonies that he wrote for the Boys. Brian sings the falsetto, just an amazing piece of music. They call Brian the Mozart of rock for obvious reasons. He just was a pure genius at creating these melodies and these harmonies. You can see even at this young age, at the age of 20, I guess, when this song came out, he was already so far advanced. I love the picture here. It shows the boys with the surfboard and the surf in the background. The only one of the 5 that was actually a surfer was the brother Dennis. He did surf. But living in Hawthorne, California, they were certainly immersed in both the surf and the hot rod culture. They have a number of songs about cars. The Little Deuce Coupe, I think, was the flip side to this song. And then She's Real Fine, My 409, about the 409 engine. And probably one of the best known, Fun, Fun, Fun Till Daddy Takes the T-Bird Away. That was a song that a lot of people could relate to back in the day. And that's the way they did it back in the day. The songs were very short. That one was 2 minutes and 27 seconds. Perfect for top 40 radio airplay, which it received a lot of in that summer of '62. And that was Brian's voice at the end with the falsetto saying "little one," going way up high with that. Just a beautiful song. He had a number of those slow ballads. Another great one was "In My Room." I can remember when we first heard this music in the '60s, we were just so blown away by the absolute beauty of the compositions and the harmonies. It was like, oh my God, these people are otherworldly. Of course, Brian had grown up, listening to the music of the '50s. He was a big fan of a lot of the a cappella group of those days, the Four Freshmen and others. So he took that sound and those harmonies and brought them into rock and roll. Another major influence on the Beach Boys, of course, was the music of Chuck Berry. Actually, some of the early songs, they actually stole the guitar lines from Chuck Berry, but that's okay because they later developed, their own style. I want to move ahead to a very similar song from 45 years later called "Forever You Will Be My Surfer Girl." This is the cover of that great album from 2008, That Lucky Old Sun. If you haven't heard this album, I highly recommend it. It's kind of a theme album. And also, there's some poetry in there that was written by his longtime collaborator, Van Dyke Park, some spoken parts as well as some music. Brian and Van had a long history. Van Dyke had worked on the Lost Smile album that the Beach Boys and Brian started working on in 1966. And then when Brian had his breakdown, it took him 43 years to finish the album. Was finally released in, I believe, 2004. Van Dyke had written the lyrics to "Heroes and Villains." It was intended to be on that album, but was actually released as a single back in '66, and then other songs. And then together they put together a beautiful album in the 1990s called Orange Crate Art, where Van Dyke wrote all the lyrics and Brian wrote all the music and performed the singing and the harmonies. And it's just a gorgeous, gorgeous album. It's really a testament to his staying ability, that he was able to come back from a very dark place where he was, really out of it for a while, and then create again this beautiful music. So let's hear a little bit to this one. I actually love this song.
Summer 61, a garden became my song. I found in her ocean eyes as endless as the sky. Forever she'll be my surfer girl. Forever she'll be my surfer girl, my little one.
You see how he reprises "My Surfer Girl, My Little One" from the original song, and he's talking. actually summer of '61. So I guess that's when he first wrote this song. It wasn't released until a year later. It was about his first girlfriend, actually, that he was with for 3 years back in those days. 40 years later, he's still looking back at her as the first love, and the deepest love of his life. And I suppose many people could relate to that as well.
First love is the moment you can't repeat, but you always own it. The gift she gave to me, her timeless melody, forever she'll be my server girl.
So sweet. That first love that you can't repeat, but you always know about. It was the best love. And listen to the background singing. He's saying so sweet, and they're going off in the background. It's classic Beach Boys sound.
So long ago, two waves gently said hello. We'll never say goodbye. We're the horizon line. Forever she'll be my server girl. Forever she'll be my server girl. My little one.
Wow. I love the way, he changed the tempo. And Brian was great at using silence. The song comes to a complete stop a couple of times there, and there's like a pause, no noise at all. And then he fills it back in. I think that's him playing the piano. And then, of course, you hear all the other instrumentation, full orchestra probably behind him. What a great production. And how nice is it 40 years later to come back to that same feeling and that same song and look at it with that kind of perspective. We are so lucky to have had Brian in our lives for the last 60 plus years. And I saw him in concert a number of times. I went down to Hartford, Connecticut, and saw his production of the entire Pet Sounds album, which he used a 26-piece orchestra to replicate the studio sound. And that was just an amazing experience. That was in the year 2000. And then more recently, I saw him when he came to Rochester, New York in 2017, and he was still rocking the place like crazy. We're going to miss Brian. He hasn't been able to perform for a year or so. He's been ill, and now he's gone. What a work of art that will stand the test of ages. Thank you, Brian, for all the beautiful music you brought to our lives.